with Frank, we went to Germany, and we played in Cologne. And Brian Eno, the well-known producer of U2 and Talking Heads and so many other great bands, and bands that I worked with, in fact, was in the audience, and he knew that David Bowie was looking for a new guitar player for an upcoming tour. So he called David and said, "You need to go see Frank Zappa's guitar player." 2 days later, we played in Berlin, and in Berlin, that's where David lived at the time, so he came to the show unbeknownst to me. There was a part of the show where Frank would play a long extended guitar solo, sometimes 10 minutes long, and everyone except the drummer and bass player who played with him would leave the stage. As I left the stage, I looked over there. Wow, there's David Bowie and Iggy Pop standing there. I couldn't believe it. So I thought, well, you got to do something here. Like the time I went over to see Ringo when he was eating dinner, I had to interrupt his dinner, and I said, "Would you like to come to our Frank Zappa show tonight?" He said, "No thanks, mate, I'm strictly 4-4. But that's another story. So I looked over at David, and I walked over and I shook his hand, and I said, "David, I love your music. I want to thank you for all the great stuff you've done." He said, "Great, how'd you like to be in my band?" I said, "Well, I'm kind of playing with that guy out there on the stage." He said, "Yes, I know." "No, of course I know. But your tour ends in 2 weeks and mine starts 2 weeks later." "Oh, so how about we go out to dinner after the show and we'll talk about it?" "Great." He said, "Okay, I'll come back to your hotel." So I went back to the hotel. Of course, I was beside myself with excitement just to get to talk to David Bowie. And I walked in the lobby, looked around. Way back in the corner, there was a little couch with a plant in front of it, and he was sitting behind that with his personal assistant, Coco. And I started walking over to him. They said, "Shh, just go upstairs. Get in the elevator, go upstairs. Come back down in about 5 minutes. We'll have a car outside." I said, "Oh, this is one of those spy things." I thought that was great, So I went upstairs, hung around for 5 minutes, came back down, went outside, and sure enough, there was a black limousine there. There's a guy who opens the door for me. I get in the limousine. In the back, there's David Bowie and Coco, and David launches into how much he loves what I do and what we would do with this song and what songs we're going to do here and that, and he was very excited. And he said, "I'm going to take you to my favorite restaurant." Now, in Berlin, there must be 50,000 restaurants. I would just guess. I don't know. So we took off in this limousine, and eventually we got to the restaurant. Driver opens the door, we get out, we walk up 3 stairs, we go right in the front, and right at the first table, there's Frank Zappa and the rest of the band. Busted. So, David said, "Well, let's sit down." We sat down with him. David was, as he is, very cordial person. And he said, "Frank, this is quite a guitar player you have here." And Frank, with his cigarette, went, "Fuck you, Captain Tom." And that is so perfectly Frank, because he actually demoted David from Major Tom to Captain Tom right there in the first sentence. I couldn't believe it. It's brilliant. David gave it another try. He said, "Well, perhaps we could just talk about this if you don't mind." And, "Fuck you, Captain Tom." David said, "Really, there's just nothing you want to say?" "Fuck you, Captain Tom." So that was that. And by then I felt like this big. And so we got up and marched out of the restaurant. We walked down the stairs to get in the car, and David looked at me and said, "I thought that went rather well." Just so you know what happened at the end of that, about a week later, I got a call from my manager, and he said, "Yes, this offer with David Bowie is for real, so you should talk with Frank about it." I did. I went back to the back of the bus one day. He was sitting there, and I said, "Frank," he had already told everyone, by the way, that he was going to edit the film Baby Snakes, and he was going to rent a big editing thing, and it would probably be 3 or 4 months to do that, and we would all just be on a retainer, small amount of money to do nothing. So I said, "Frank, David actually has offered me a job to play with him for 4 months. I could either take that job or I could take your retainer and do nothing for 4 months. What do you think I should do? And he said, well, I think you should go and work with David Bowie. And he shook my hand, and that was that. What happened, unfortunately, is neither things happened correctly. David's tour went 1.5 years, and Frank didn't do the editing. He did a new band and went right straight back out on tour. But every time I ever went to LA from that moment on, I'd always get a cab and go up to his house and sit around and chat with him. You know, we really got on great. I love Frank.